Well, just hours after ISIS claimed responsibility for the deadly attack at the Manchester concert last night, British authorities identified 22-year-old Salim Abidi as the suicide bomber. Abidi is believed to have been born in England to parents who immigrated there from North Africa. This horrific attack, of course, overseas happens just 1 week after Secretary of Homeland Security here in America, John Kelly, updated the National Terrorism Advisory System here in the United States. So Kelly warned, this is interesting and pressing in many ways. He warned that homegrown terrorists currently pose one of the most serious threats to the United States since the September 11th attacks. But just how exactly do we ever get ahead of the so-called homegrown terror? Joining me now, Ian Donald and Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, you and I have talked before about this jihad Salafi ideology. Young men and sometimes, I guess, women born in the West who still ultimately end up in some form of what you would call homegrown terror or self-radicalization, attacking their adopted countries or the countries they were born in and killing people that they knew. And how does this happen?
Well, they don't fall in from outer space, Charles. They are radicalized in our communities. And how do we define radicalism? It's not just when they put on the suicide belt. There is a continuum of radicalization, that most of which is a nonviolent ideology. And no surprise, again, this guy is a known wolf, and he was born in England. So the ideologies within the community are doing that, coming either from abroad or from within. So we have to begin to target and systematically, societally, not just deal with this for a few days post every event and a whack-a-mole program, but deal with it systemically so that we counter those who have identities outside the country, who reject British nationalism or American nationalism, who believe in jihad politically and Sharia-wise, as far as the law is concerned, reject secular law for theocratic law. Islam is in that time of history. And it's time for the president to convene that Commission on Radical Islam that he said he wanted to do. And I think the main people, as much as Saudi Arabia and others are important, this work is going to be done in the West because we have the laboratory to do it here that they don't have the laboratory to do in the Middle East.
And apparently this Abidi was studying business. I guess to a degree he was in the mainstream, but we do see across Europe where a lot of Muslim immigrants refuse to assimilate, certainly the way assimilation takes place here in this country. And so that has to make it harder to be able to identify this. To me, it seems like it would put a lot of pressure within the community itself to step up and take some form of responsibility, because these things don't happen overnight, the radicalization process.
Sure. And I think I'll chime off some of the things Zuhdi just said. I think that Europe particularly, and in comparison to America, has a larger, greater level of stress given the larger size per head of population of the Muslim communities. It has a bigger challenge. And I think two of the really interesting things that we see now with the IS terror dynamic versus what we've seen with Al-Qaeda before and others before them, two really key dynamics which have created additional stress on that system. The sheer size and scale and diversity of the foreign fighters involved in the IS battles in Syria and Iraq, and therefore the extent to which they are now available to go back to their countries of origin. And when they go back to the countries of origin, they behave as effectively as figureheads and instigators. And then secondly, really the enormous proliferation of propaganda and technical guidance that we now see available online in pretty much any language you could point at.
Zuhdi, according to an NYPD white paper, there's 4 steps: pre-radicalization, self-identification, indoctrination, and finally jihadization. For me, I get very, very frustrated and even angry, to be quite frank with you, because this does not happen overnight. People see this, neighbors see it, family members see it, community members see it, mosque members see it. Where does the Muslim community, whether it's in America or in the West, their responsibility to say, hey, you know what, this particular person has fallen outside of the realm of normalcy and poses a threat to everyone?
Well, because the bottom line is our billions of dollars in national security and homeland security are being spent on what is lawful and unlawful. Did he break the law? Is he part of a terror group? Then he's okay. Well, we civil society folks, I don't want government tapping and breaking my civil rights, etc. So if I don't want that, then we need to show America that we are going to lead the solution and begin to expose the Islamist ideology. When a sermon is given that is supporting Saudi Arabia, supporting Wahhabism, blaming America, making Muslims into victims, all of these things are part of the radicalization that we need to expose in the antiseptic of sunlight in part of counter-radicalization. It's not illegal thought, but it is speech that needs to be marginalized and narrowed down as being the root cause of the problem. The other thing, Charles, is the Paris attacks in November 2015 were done, and then the same cell committed an act in March 2016 in Brussels. So they went and hid out in Molenbeek, and this separatism,
right.
this lack of homogeneity into society is a major problem, and this is probably why we still have a threat now in Britain.
All right, guys, thank you both.